BYD and all EVs are making a lot of headway in Europe, in the UK, and of course that means we have to talk about it. And if we're going to do that, we should probably find somebody who knows what's going on that side of the world, that half of the platter, if you will. And I hope you won't, because that's ridiculous. I'm Brian. Welcome to Futuraza. So I got Will from Tesla Jigsaw here. We met, almost a year ago now in Farnborough, England at Fully Charged. And we had a lovely bunch of chats because we just kind of hung out at the Tesla Owners UK stand. It was a lot of fun. Will and I have both seen BYDs and Auras and Maxus trucks and MGs, all kinds of Chinese brands. How are the Chinese brands doing? Just as an overview, are you seeing them on the roads yet?
Not really. There's not that many here, I've got to be honest. We seem to be flooded by Teslas around here in the sort of Midlands. Every time I go out, the count for Teslas now is getting ridiculous. There's just too many to count. So yeah, every time I see a BYD, it's quite a surprise, put it that way.
And it's interesting. A lot of people have this belief that if you let Chinese cars into the market, they will immediately crush everything. But that doesn't seem to be the case. They're not that much cheaper, and in many cases they're not even cheaper. So if we look at this is a neat one. February 2024 UK passenger auto registrations looking pretty good here. What have we got? 24.8%. Does that jive with, now obviously you're not in London. London has their, what do they call that, the low emissions zone?
Oh, the low emission zones, yeah, in London and in some other cities as well.
And I think London is going to, or was proposing, expanding the size of it.
Yeah, it has. I did a couple of videos about that a while ago. So the ULEZ zone, that you have to pay money if you've got an old car, but the old cars have to be actually really quite old in order to pay it. So it's different for diesels or petrols. But obviously, with all these electric cars, you're free to sort of travel into the city, and you don't get fined for it.
Fined? I mean, it's
It is the right
word.
one.
It's a right word,
Yeah,
I guess.
the disruption came when they were putting cameras up in people's residential streets. That's when it was a bit like, okay, now this is getting a little bit oppressive, a little bit.
This is a bit much, guys.
Who wants cameras pointing at their streets for the cars, just to check the number plates, which they were number plate recognition cameras. But anyway, look at that. I've digressed us already in the first 2 minutes. I do apologize.
In market volume terms, BEVs were up 21% year over year to 15,000 units. Plug-ins up 29% from a low baseline to 6,000 units. Overall auto market volume was up 13%. Now, I was looking at the year over year sales for autos generally, and I noticed the last few years have been really low. What's that about? I mean, for all auto sales in the UK.
Yeah, well, I can imagine that interest rates have had a bit of a reaction there. Personally, I don't think the electric car offerings have been sort of good enough or cheap enough in order to tempt people away. But then saying that, there's still, currently to date now, we've just got, 1/5 of all car sales are battery electric vehicles. That's a huge amount. That's not to be snuffed at, if that's a phrase. And then, of course, you've got the hybrid cars that have just, that are still selling. And, we all know that they're probably the stepping stone to the next vehicle will be an electric car as well. So I think we're all just waiting for a lot cheaper cars. And the sort of slight disappointment with BYD for me is that they're not that cheap. I mean, you see the very cheapest BYD Dolphin that I can buy today, which I found on Auto Trader, is still £25,000 for a very small 200-mile range car. Now, that's not quite being flooded with cheap Chinese cars, so I think we're all just very much hopeful for far cheaper electric cars, but it's coming. It's going to take time. They have to build them.
So what BMWs are you seeing? Are the X3 and 5s are the big ones? I know they've got some sedans. You're seeing some of those out there. MG, those are respectable numbers.
Yeah, they're around. I haven't actually driven them yet. I should give them a go, since I'm such a fan of the old BMW i3. But but again, for the price of the BMWs, it seems a bit staggering. I did sit in one at Fully Charged that was just £120,000, and I just couldn't get my head around how it was £120,000. unless anyone's coming to the market with sub £40,000 electric cars, equal to that of a Tesla Model 3, I don't see sort of sales picking up too much, unless that happens. We just need cheaper cars.
In Fully Charged in Vancouver, Canada, Dr. Know It All and I had an opportunity to do a shared test drive where we took turns and filmed each other, which is a great way to do it if you've got a spare cameraman for each of your channels. But we drove what is it? Is it not the X5, whatever the electric 5 is. And we drove it. And we're like, this is good. It's pretty powerful. It's quite comfortable. It's got some silly, goofy stuff that they added for no reason. And I said, as a Model Y competitor, this is very solid. And they're like, well, this is supposed to be the Model X competitor. And I was like,
Hmm.
oh, it doesn't have the speed. And then we look at the price tag, and I want to say in Canada, it was like 100 grand or more. And yeah, we're like, oh no, this is going to have some obstacles. So what I was looking at
Hmm.
for auto sales is uh, total auto sales by year. You can see it had peaked around 2.6, 2.7 million, and then had some years of drops. And it is still way, as of 22 at least, way off the peak. Um, so auto sales generally, and this predates the interest rates going up. So there's some
Yeah, well, I think on the whole, the UK's not had a great time of it either. I mean, after COVID, lots of people have lost their businesses and livelihoods still, and then we also have a cost of living crisis where energy prices, obviously have absolutely shot up and crippled a lot of people. I mean, it's been a real tough time for us over winter, coming up with £400 a month just to heat and power our home. Um, and we're not the only ones. It's not a great situation to be buying a new car at the moment. And then, obviously electricity prices have gone up, so electricity prices are quite costly charges. It's all coming down again now. So we've had some good news today that from April things are getting a lot better. But I just, along with interest rates and everything else, it's just not been a great time to buy a new car, let alone a very expensive one.
Well, in terms of lower cost offerings, I guess we could point out that BYD is looking to increase market share 3x in Europe. And um, while technically, geographically, the UK is part of Europe, I know I met some people in Ireland who say, no, 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 you've just arrived. Oh, you came from England? Welcome to Europe. So
Yeah.
actually, what it was is my American Express card wouldn't work. And I said, boy, I find that a lot in Ireland. It worked fine in the UK. And the guy said, well, you're in Europe now. So, yeah. Uh, Chinese auto manufacturer BYD aims to triple its share in this market by 2025. There are ways to increase your market share. One is brand awareness, but the other is the thing you just mentioned. Got to cut the price.
Mm,
Got
yeah.
to make an
Well,
affordable car.
yeah. Well, I mean, it's getting there, isn't it? I suppose the Dolphin being £25,000 isn't so bad, but the Atto 3 starts at 35,900 for a 260-mile range car. Yeah, that's still expensive, isn't it? Really. And then the Seal, which is the when I went for a test drive and I made a video on it on my channel, the salesman chap told me that it was not really a Model 3 rival. Don't judge it against the new Model 3. Put it more against a Model S, because
Oh,
it's got pop out door handles and a rotating screen. So I didn't really see the similarities between the Model S. I've got to be honest; it did seem to be a Model 3 competitor, albeit a slightly more complicated interior. But the price of it being, the cheapest one I could find new today was £44,344, which is a RRP price of 45,695. So that's almost £6,000 more than the entry level Tesla Model 3, and that seems to be a problem to me because it's a nice car, it looks nice, it's built very well on the inside, But clearly the software and everything else just isn't. For me at least, it's very hard for me to try and be as objective as I can, because I really wanted to love the BYD seal, and I went from loving it when I first got in it to hating it by the end of the video, and that's
Mm.
no exaggeration. So
That's
I can mention
unfortunate.
more if you want me to, but yeah.
As well, what I'll do is I'll just link your video and maybe we'll put up a little clip of it here while we're talking. You and I had a chance to look at the BYD, but not drive it last year. And now you've driven it. I still have not had a chance to drive one. There is a showroom in California, even though they don't sell them in the US. It's just for presence, to have a presence in the market, even if they're not selling. But to say it's a Model S competitor is laughable. I mean, it's as heavy as a Model S. I'll give it that.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
if it was significantly cheaper than the Tesla, it would be a no-brainer. I think a lot of people would be happy to buy it. But at these
Yep.
prices, it's
Hmm. I
and
think if it sat at the same price as the entry level Model 3, I think that would be a fair comparison, actually, because it's definitely got a lot going for it that perhaps people who haven't driven an electric car before would get into it, and it would feel lovely and plush. But for me, it just didn't feel intuitive to use at all, the interface. And it made me feel really sick with the whole sort of squishy experience of the car, because the steering wheel and the brake pedal that you could push all the way down. It was just such a wobbly, weird experience for me. And it also doesn't have one pedal driving. So you just start coasting when you
oh,
take your foot off. It just didn't make sense to me. So I was
huh,
constantly sort of just like
yeah.
that. And the incessant warning chimes with the final nail in the coffin for me. It just did not stop bleeping at me wherever I went. And even when I was traveling the speed limit, sometimes the sat nav thought I was in a different area with a lower speed limit, so it would just constantly bong at you. Although I've since heard, since my video, that BYD are going to actually turn that off, or at least have a vibration or something, just to warn you of the speed limit. But that's a more of a European regulation that's coming to all cars anyway at some point. So I can't hold BYD responsible for that one, I suppose.
One thing I found hilarious here is I just searched BYD seal versus Tesla Model S, and every result shows Model 3 because it is
Hmm.
not nobody is comparing it, Mr. Salesman. That is
No.
not, that's unfortunate. The good news is those are things that can be fixed if they're not, maybe not on the
Yep.
one purchased today, but on the one purchased next year or the year after. And in the early days of Tesla, when the panel gaps were real, when the panel fit and finish was not as good as it could be, there were people who said, boy, I just can't take them seriously until they get that sorted out. And I said, they're already selling in big, big numbers. Once they get it sorted out, the Model Y could be the best selling car in the world. And of course, that's laughable. That could never happen. A $50,000 car, number one in the world? What are you talking about? And then they got their panel gap sorted out, and here we are. So the article again, they're saying that, yeah, they're looking to expand their market share and get it up to, 3 times what it is. They may build a factory in Hungary to
Yeah.
get it within the EU, which is, I don't know how much experience Hungary has building cars, but
Yeah, well, it's only, that's the point though, isn't it? I really wish BYD all the best, and I really hope they do come up with the goods to be a great competitor to Tesla, because we still need, many, many more millions of cars being built each year. It's got to come from someone. It's just, I was hoping that the price would be there, but it's in my mind, the entire BYD problem is just price. But then I understand, we've got VAT and tariffs and everything else that's having a real impact here, and obviously the safety standards need to include far better kit in the UK than it does in China. So, there's a lot to be considered, I suppose, isn't there?
there is. It's interesting to me to see MG outselling all these other brands, but that
Mm.
could be just a delivery wave. That could be something that we don't see sustained over the course of the year. And yeah, looking down, and BYD way down here. So the idea that BYD is just going to automatically take over the whole market is not well founded, I guess is what I would say on that. Uh,
I'd be
so
rather surprised, given seeing all three cars and having sat in them and played around with them for a while. It's they're good. They're good cars, but it's just at the price points. Yeah.
There were people who recently criticized Elon for his criticism of BYD 12 years ago when they said, "What about BYD?" And he laughed and said, "Have you seen their cars?" That was a
Hmm.
correct sentiment, definitely 12
Then.
years ago. And to
Yeah.
some extent, according to some of the hands-on we've seen, maybe that's still the correct sentiment. I can't speak to that, having never driven one. I will
Hmm.
I will work on that. I will be in Europe in May, so I will see if I can
Yeah.
find one. Find
Well, I
one.
should just add at the end there, the interior quality is really nice. The exterior is really nice. It's got pretty lights on it. It ticks a lot of boxes. It's nice. Yeah, but you've got a smaller boot than the Model 3. The seat I found to be really uncomfortable because you couldn't raise the base of the seat high enough for my legs. So it did actually, after the end of the 2 hours, my legs were really sore and I couldn't quite find a comfortable seated position. That was a bit strange as well.
That is
But on the
strange.
positives, the range was fantastic. 330-mile range, and I barely ate into that in sort of quite a good test drive. So it's got a lot going for it, but
And I think the
intuitive
styling
for
is
me, it was
good.
not.
Yeah, I
Hmm.
think the styling is good. I like the styling of the Model 3, but I think it's a more aggressive styling. I think it looks fine.
Yeah.
So those are our thoughts. My question would be for you guys, I guess, is at what price would you even consider this car? It is heavier than a Tesla. It is quicker on the 0 to 60 or the 0 to 100 kilometers, but lower top speed. I think they just geared it down a little to get that 0 to 60 up. And it's got different bells and whistles. The software is not going to be as good because no one's is as good as a Tesla yet. All of those things will improve. Would you even consider a car like this? Let us know in the comments. And if you get a chance to check out Tesla Jigsaw, Will does some pretty fantastic work. And I will have a link in the description to that video we were discussing that I may or may not have shown clips of during this video. So like, subscribe, do the usual things, show your support. It means the world to me. It's how we actually get to do these things and bring you all this wisdom. Everybody else, like, subscribe, smack the thummy thing, either direction. Doesn't matter. It's purely decorative, but it does count. And all that, you know what you're doing. And stay tuned. Stay juicy. And I can't wait to hear from you clever robots, perhaps in Austria in May, where I will be at the X Takeover.